And I said, whatever happened to them? Whatever happened to them? Then I'll look them up, Google them, and see what happened to that person. And you find out that a lot of them, I'm looking at some of them, saying that person there, and this is just how my mind thinks. I'm looking at saying that person is sitting right there, and they don't know that in just a few years they're going to be dead. Now they think they're going to live to be 80, 90, 100 years old, but they're not. They're going to live just a few more years, and they're going to be gone. And in fact, there was one particular episode where one of the panelists that had been on there for years did the show, recorded the show, left, and before morning was dead. And I'm looking at that thing, how weird is that to look at somebody and to think that they have no idea sitting there that tomorrow's going to rise, the sun's going to rise, and they're not going to be in this world. And that's what James is saying. He says, you presume, you think that because you have this or that, that you're in control of things. You don't control it, poor or rich. The 49th Psalm is a very dark psalm. In fact, he starts it out by saying, I will open my dark saying upon my harp. And he's talking about how the rich and poor die together. Doesn't make a lick of difference whether you've got money or not. When it comes your time, you're going. And so don't be so presumptuous and proud as to think that you're in control and God isn't. So we humble ourselves before the Lord and say, if the Lord wills, I'm going to do this. If the Lord wills, I'm going to do that. For you ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now you rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. That's what I was saying there a moment ago. They were glorying in what they had done. They were boasting in their accomplishments. And he said all of that is wicked. Because as Paul said, what do you have that you have not received? Why dost thou glory, he said, as though you had not received it? You see people get up and they glory in the fact that they're beautiful or handsome. Or they glory in the fact that they're a good singer. Or they glory in the fact that they have the ability to paint fine art or do these things. What do you have that you have not received? He says, and yet you glory as though you had done this. I'm a self-made man. What do you have that you've not received? Like the farmer, look what I've done. Yeah, but God gave you the seed, the soil, the water, everything, the sunlight, everything you needed to grow that. God gave it to you and you act like you did it. He says all such glorying is evil. I have what I have by the grace of God. I am what I am, Paul said, by the grace of God. And so he says, don't presume on any things. Recognize God is always in control. If the Lord wills, I'm going to do this. Look at all that you've got and say, man, it's not mine, it's God's. I'm just a steward. How many times does the Bible say that? I mean, Job said it. He said, naked came I into this world, naked shall I leave it. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Apostle Paul says, you brought nothing into this world, and it is certain you will carry nothing out. So at best, whatever you have, you're just a steward of it. In other words, you're just a manager of it. But you're going to give it up. It's going to go back to where it came. But now you rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Saying, oh, I'm a self-made man. That's evil. I had a guy stand in front of me one day and tell me that. I'm a self-made man. And I looked at him and I thought, you're pitiful. It's sad that you actually believe that and you don't recognize everything you have comes from God. And He can take it away in a heartbeat. Just like Job said, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Humble yourselves. That's Paul, or rather James's whole point here. Submit yourselves to God. Humble yourself before God. And don't be arrogant about these things. He says in verse 17, therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. There's a couple of things here that I like about this verse. One is, I think that if you know to do good and you don't do good, then it's sin. If you know that you should help somebody and you don't help them, then it becomes a sin. Not just an individual person, but just people in general. You know to do, like for instance, he said earlier about the widows and the fatherless, the orphans. he said, if you know now that that's what you're supposed to be doing and you don't do it, then that's sinful. You understand? That's sinful. But not only that, he said, all these things that I'm telling you, he says, now you're becoming accountable, because if you know to do these things and you don't do them, it's sin. If I tell you that being a respecter of persons is wrong and you still do it, it's become sin to you. And so, but mainly I think he's talking about in the fact that we're to do good. You know, we're to be a people zealous of good works. If we know to do good and we don't do it, then it becomes sin for us. And all of this that he talks about before and after have to do with riches. Right? He's talking about people saying, you know, that I've got this and I'm going to go buy and sell and I'm going to go make a profit. Then he follows it up into chapter 5, and again, it's not written in chapters and verses, so it's a continued thought. He starts in chapter 5, he says, go to now, you rich men. Here he says it again. He calls them near again. Come near and listen to what I'm about to tell you, he says. Go to now, you rich men. Weep and howl. Howl is the idea of wailing. Wailing. Weep and wail for your miseries that shall, your torments that shall come upon you. There's a lot of trouble coming for rich people. Not just because they're wealthy, but because, he'll explain that in a moment, but because of the greed and the covetousness that sometimes, a lot of times, accompanies accumulating wealth. You know, again, Jesus tells two parables about covetousness. He tells the one about the man building the barns and storing up, and he doesn't consider others. But the most, to me, the one that really stands out is Luke 16, when he tells the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man was clothed in fine linen and purple and fared sumptuously every day, had plenty. And he contrasts that to a man sitting at the man's gate, his body covered with sores, begging for the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Why does Jesus make such a contrast there? He wants you to see it's not that he has the wealth, it's that he has it and is heartless toward those sitting at his gate and wouldn't lift his finger to help them. Them that know to do good and do it not, it's sin. A man could say, well, I don't steal, I don't kill, I don't commit adultery. Yeah, but you looked at heartlessly at that man while you had more than enough. You clothed yourself in clothing that you didn't have to have. You spent way more on that. And that guy there is sitting at your gate. And so he tells these kind of men, go to now, you rich man, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Trouble is coming to you. Judgment is coming to you because you've lived. You know, think about it, guys. I challenge you to read your New Testament and find out how many times he condemns the idea of covetousness. And I think I mentioned a few years ago here, in all my time growing up in church, I can't remember one sermon ever being preached on covetousness. And yet it's there all the way through Scripture. And in fact, he lists it right along with murder and stealing and adultery. But we talk about all of those things, we don't talk about covetousness. And the idea of covetousness is that I want gain and I'll run over anybody to get it, and I'm greedy and I'll live selfishly and won't care about anybody else. In fact, the Apostle Paul was inspired to write against covetousness, saying covetousness, which is idolatry. You worship things. You accumulate your goods. You fare sumptuously, but you do it at the expense of others. He said, judgment's coming to you. You may live in that nice house now. You may be enjoying wearing the nice clothes now. You may have a big amount stored up. But he said, I'm telling you, judgment's coming against you because of what you've done to get what you've got. Because your heartlessness. And that's Jesus' whole point in telling the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Was that, remember that I told you two words in that story that stand out, but now. Remember that thou in thy lifetime receivest good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted. and you're tormented. The tables have turned on you. So all these people that are wealthy, that are running over people to get what they want, people who step on anybody to get up the corporate ladder, people that will steal from other people and cheat other people to get what they want. And they think that God doesn't know that? God knows that. People that are heartless toward people that are in need while they are, they're eating more. What does the Bible talk about gluttony? You're eating until you're sick, and this guy over here is starving to death. What heartlessness in all of that. That's why when I don't apologize for the fact that we have a stand about adornment. Because part of the reason why we have that stand is you've got to be careful that you don't convey to people that you have no care about them. I've got gold Rolex watch on that could feed you for 2 years. But I'll let you starve to death, be warmed and filled while I'm wearing this. So that doesn't make any sense. That's what the Bible condemns. The man who built the bigger and better barns or greater barns, it wasn't that he had a bumper crop. God gave him the bumper crop. The problem was that the man didn't care about anybody but himself. What did God want him to do with the extra? Consider somebody else. I appreciate Brother Johnson over on the other side of the state, and how he was taught from a child that they had a certain field out there and they planted it with corn every year. He's mentioned it as his daddy's funeral, and he said they would just let people just come from the town and they'd just go out there in the field and pick the corn. And he questioned his father about that, but that goes back a long ways. But to the idea that God didn't give me what I have just for me. I can help other people with what God's given me, and so I don't want to. And that's what the Bible says. The Apostle Paul wrote about this very same thing, and he told them. He said, "Tell the rich men among you to be rich in good works, to be ready to communicate or get involved in other people's needs, to lay up for themselves a good foundation against the life to come." In other words, lay up treasures in heaven. Use what God's blessed you with to do good for others, that God can, that you can do things that matter to God and that help others. "Go to now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are cankered, and the rest of them shall be a witness against you." Let me just stop there. At the beginning of verse 2 it says, "Your riches are corrupted." It means they're rotted. So in ancient times, they would store up. You remember how that when Joseph, they knew there was going to be a famine, he said, "We'll store up grain." Rich people didn't just store up gold and silver or money, but they stored up goods, food, and we'll hoard it over here. Other people now need it, but they're not going to get none of my food. I've got this stored up. And he says, "I'm telling you, rich people that are accumulating these things, there'll come a day when all you've accumulated will rot." And he says, "And your garments are moth-eaten." He's looking into the future. They've stored all these wonderful garments and all of these things. And he says, "But you're not going to keep them." There are ancient tombs that have been opened up for 100 years, 200 years now. They'll go back and open these Egyptian pyramids, and they'll find that they've got all of these treasures that those people have stored up, and they're still there. I remember reading about the king over in Europe, Charlemagne. One time they said that they went and they opened up Charlemagne's tomb to see what was inside, and they had seated him on a throne in this mausoleum type thing that they had built, and they had put his purple robe on him, and had stored all of these goods there with him. Had a golden scepter in his hand, and a Bible in the other hand, an open Bible in the other hand. And the guy that was writing the story said when they opened the tomb, his robe, his purple robe of kingship had disintegrated. And the scepter had fallen out of his hand. His crown had fallen off his head. Just the skeleton sitting on this throne. But the Bible was still there. And his bony finger said, was pointed to a verse, what shall it profit a man if he gains the world and loses his soul? This is what James is saying. He says, those clothes you're so caught up in, he says, moths will eat. Jesus said the same thing. Where moths and rust doth corrupt and thieves break through and steal. It's not going to last, but you're so caught up and I'm going to accumulate it. The Egyptian pharaohs thought, if we bury ourselves with these things and we can take them on with us to the afterlife. But all these centuries later, their bodies have disintegrated, and there in their tombs and these pyramids, they open them up, and everything they stored up is either rotted or it's there, but they didn't take it with them. And this is what James is saying. All of this is going to go to nothing. That's why Jesus said, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moth and rust doesn't corrupt and thieves don't break through and steal. If you take those same things and you use it for the purpose of God, then you don't lose it. You invest it in eternity. That's what Jesus told the rich ruler.